Maybe it didn't last night. Hello.
Hi. Let me change my name on here. I was having technical difficulties.
No worries. No worries at all. We were all distracted watching Greg and Reyes.
Okay.
Mr. Attorney General man was dodging every question posed to him.
What was that?
Our current Attorney General was avoiding every question that was asked to him in the debate, and Greg was on the attack. So.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what the end vote is for that. So.
Yeah.
All right. I am going to start this if you're ready.
Yes, I'm ready.
Perfect. Give it just a second here. All right. It is another one of our one-on-one interviews with the county chair. Very glad to have you with us tonight. Hopefully those of you who have joined us from the debate tonight between the Attorney General's candidates will enjoy this just as much. And if you hadn't seen those debates, go find them. I'm sure they're out online. But tonight we have the wonderful Jenna Rakuita. Glad to have you with us.
Hello.
Glad to have someone so young and so off of the average old white male to go and try to represent that area of Provo. There are too many old white men like me. Although they're not like me. What can I say? They're not Democrats. If they were Democrats, now that'd be something else, but they're not. But, for those people who haven't had the opportunity to meet you, tell us about yourself. Tell us where you grew up, why you studied what you studied, why you decided to go from college straight into public service.
Yeah. So I actually graduated from BYU in 2018. I majored in sociology, and I've been working in a social work position ever since. So I've been working in a social work position for about 2.5 years, and I decided to run for office because I care a lot about my community, and I noticed a lot of gaps in the policies that were being created and the needs of the constituents within my area. And with 71% of the population within my district in Provo, ranging from the ages 18 to 24 years old, it was really important, or it is really important, to have a representative who talks to students and young people, who reaches out to them, who knows their needs, caters to their interests, and who knows how to work with both families and young people. And as a social worker, that I fit that. And so that was a job that I knew that I could handle.
I muted myself.
I was like, I don't hear you.
Live broadcast, folks, live broadcast. I'm not so far removed from college life that I don't remember what it was like to live south of BYU campus, where there's so many students. And I had roommates move in and out every single college semester. Highly transient, highly willing to uproot and move somewhere else. I know some people they'd rent out an apartment for spring, summer, and then they'd go somewhere else because those apartments would go from being single students to married student housing or whatever, or vice versa, right? And I think it is because it's hard. It's hard to remember what it's like. My mother's raising my nephew right now, and she's having to recall what it was like to raise me 40 years ago. And it's hard for her to remember that. So I can understand for people in Salt Lake on Capitol Hill to maybe have a hard time remembering what it's like to be a student and to feel like the citizens of DC. You're taxed, you are bound by laws that you don't feel you have a say in. So talk to me about what you're doing to help that aspect, to help them feel like they have representation. What have you and your team been doing? Because I think it's amazing.
Yeah, so we've been talking to the community members. We've been socially distancing when knocking on doors. We've been registering voters. We've been reaching out via social media. We've been having Zoom events. And so really talking to the people within our communities. And that is something that hasn't been happening previously. I've lived in Provo for 7 years, and not once have I seen my representative talk to students and young people. Not once have I heard from my representative, have I seen them show up to community events that I was attending. And so merely talking to them, engaging with them, knowing their interests, understanding their concerns, a representative should be doing, right? Those are all things that that's the job of a representative, and that's not something that has been happening here.
Well, I like that you and your team have been encouraging those students who could or can register to vote in that area because they deserve representation. These young people are doing so much to study and learn and prepare and be functional, contributing members of society. And yet we're not taking care of them. We're not looking out for them. You know, when I lived south of campus, I know that transit was an awful thing. And when I was there, they were bandying about the idea of the South Campus Area Master Plan, ripping up the roads and making it a walking area. And I just thought, have you met the students that live here? It showed the disconnect. So the fact that you're going about and encouraging them to register and all of them to vote, I think is a very important thing, because they need representation. They need someone who understands them, who's not so far removed that they can't understand them. Very, very important.
Yeah. And local politics has a huge influence on our lives. And local politics, honestly, if you want to change your everyday life, spend your energy investing in local politics and spend your energy investing in representatives that care about you and are willing to listen to you. I mean, national politics, they political discussion, but really local politics has has a great potential to really impact our daily lives.
It really does. You're spot on. I know that you mentioned social distancing. Obviously, our student populations are among the hardest hit right now. And I know part of it is there's kind of that idea of, well, it won't hurt me as bad. Um, but looking at COVID and looking at your efforts, how has it changed over the summer now that you've seen more and more people contracting COVID?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we have definitely moved to more efforts in regards to phone banking, reaching out online, really trying to engage people on social media. I mean, if you want to reach out to people and try to reach out on social media, this population is the place to do it, to
True.
really engage people online. I mean,
True.
we know how to work online. And so we've been doing Zoom events, we've been answering DMs, doing Instagram lives. So those are all efforts that we've been moving towards as numbers have been increasing in Provo.
Now, obviously, as a representative in Salt Lake, you can't necessarily pass a law about this sort of thing. But knowing you, I would presume that you would find like-minded representatives and senators and would lobby whoever the governor is next year to take steps to help Utah get past this, to take the steps to reduce the infection rate so that we can move on and find a new sense of normalcy. Would you say
Yeah,
I'm wrong?
definitely. You're absolutely right. And that is something that is extremely important to me. I think being able to get back to a place where we can feel normal, that requires our communities working together. It requires us acting selflessly and being able to understand the importance of, you know, wearing a mask in social situations and at restaurants, in the grocery stores, and taking effort.
Lost you a little bit there. So, but I hope everyone else heard it. I know as I've dealt with the changes in COVID, because I've gone from working in an office to working at home. I tell you, I think 8 hours a day away from my wife and kids helps me appreciate them all the more. Um, but I know that one thing I've struggled with is a little bit of a depression because of the big change. And I know I have teenagers. They're hitting the mid-teen years and they're really struggling. They are really having a hard time. And so I know, especially where you are at that age of college, where you're looking for a life partner, you're looking to settle down and make a life with someone, and that's taken away from you. That has to be dramatically affecting them. And with your background in sociology, what would you say to folks who are struggling with depression right now? What would you do as a representative to help folks? Because obviously this is an ongoing issue with the young people. Utah has one of the highest suicide rates, and we need to address that, because it's not going away on its own, and it's not going to go away on its own. But I'll let you go ahead. Tell me what you would do. Tell me what advice you'd give and what you would do as a representative for that.
Definitely. And so as a social worker, this is something that I'm really passionate about. I care really deeply about mental health, and I know the impacts that it has on education, on social life, on just the ability to function in everyday society. And so, just like you said, mental health is really prevalent among the people within my community, or within the community of Provo, within District 63. The vast majority of the people living within this district, that age range, suicide is the second leading cause of death. And so, yeah, it's vital that we're focusing on mental health. So when it comes to mental health, I would focus on increasing the capacity for gatekeeper trainings, which would essentially increase the trainings, and specifically in regards to helping community members recognize signs of suicide and be able to really help the individuals within the community, kind of like this tighter knit community where we're all helping each other and recognizing those signs when we see them. As well as we need an increase of social workers and psychologists in schools. Utah is extremely understaffed when it comes to social workers and psychologists. We don't have enough, and that really impacts students' mental health and well-being, which then impacts their education. So those are some of the main things that I would focus on.
You know, it's one of those things that I remember, you know, in high school, because I grew up in rural Utah, and there were students who struggled really bad. There were students who attempted suicide, and it was shocking to us. But then at the same time, I think we all dealt with a little bit of depression about this or that. And, you know, for some of us, it was short and it was not long-term. And for others of us, I know several who it's been a long-term thing. Some of them, it was the fact that they identified with the LGBTQ community. And I had a number of friends up in Heber that dealt with those feelings and reconciling them in a very tight-knit, very Mormon community. And that would go for any religious community, really, unfortunately, in the United States right now, or especially back then, because this was the 90s. So take it for what it's worth. Obviously, we need to address that too. And, you know, it's a little more under the radar at BYU compared to UVU. But in your role as representative, what would you do to help those who are part of the LGBTQ group, who don't feel represented, who don't feel cared for? What would you push for?
You cut out a little bit, but I think I might have cut you off right there. You're cutting out a little bit, but I think I understood your question. You can keep going.
Go ahead.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you were finished, but so yeah, this is something, again, that I'm really passionate about, is not only recognizing mental health concerns, but also how different identities might experience mental health at varying levels, and how that might be a different experience for them, and how we need to cater to each of those needs. And so first and foremost is by taking the time, again, to listen and to learn from these communities. So I actually had this discussion with Provo Pride as well as Encircle, and we just talked about some of their concerns within the community, some of the things that they wanted to see from a representative. And youth who belong to the LGBTQ plus community are actually 5 times more likely to attempt suicide than their heterosexual counterparts. And so right now, currently, Utah does not offer protection against discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity in areas such as schools, in foster care, in adoption, private insurance, public accommodations, and all of these things that where they're not offered protection, all of those areas impact the mental health of that community, because when you are not having your your basic needs or your basic rights met, that impacts your mental health. And so ensuring that they are protected in those areas.
That's something I've had to learn, and that I have learned readily, because I have a neighbor who went on a voyage of discovery, and he realized he was transgender. He considered very much the process of transitioning, and when he asked me to use she, her, hers, I did, because I knew that that would help her to feel more accepted and to not be suicidal, so that she could work through everything and decide what she really wanted. She eventually said that she wanted back to he, her, his, or he, his, him. And so again, I use the masculine pronouns. But then, another friend of mine, their child came to them one day and said, I'm transgender. The child in the first month wanted they, their, theirs. The next month they wanted she, her, hers. Then they went back to they, their, theirs. And then they're back to he, him, his, right? But the parents, bless them, made the decision that they were going to support the child for the very reason that you state, that high risk of suicide. And that's one thing that really concerns me, because I know that the youth are stressed. They're not making a lot of money. They've got a lot of tuition bills. They're going into debt. They're trying to find someone to settle down with. They're trying to feel like they belong. And you add all that in the mix, it's a recipe for some good mental strain. And it's no wonder to me that there's some struggles with depression.
Yeah. And it honestly, and it's not a party issue, right? We're talking about people who are, that is their sexual orientation, and they are more likely to die by suicide because of who they are attracted to and who they have the capacity to love. And that is not okay. It's just not okay. And so we do need to address that, and we need to ensure that we're taking the steps forward to not only include them in the conversations, but create policies that are aware that there is a disparity there.
Going forward, assuming that you've won, because I don't see why you wouldn't. You're a great representative for your district. What are your first three things that you want to do when the session starts in January?
You cut out a little bit.
What are the first three things that you want to do in Salt Lake?
So I would focus on housing. Housing is a huge frustration within Provo. And so I would focus on housing policies and ensuring that renters' rights are protected. I would focus on mental health, like we talked about, specifically in regards to suicide prevention. And then I would focus on employment when it comes to recent graduates, and specifically how COVID relates to their employment prospects, and ensuring that they are able to best find the employment that they need to, and employments that have good benefits and good pay.
And that's a very important thing, because our students that are graduating in this year and in next are in a similar climate economically to 2008. I have a friend, he finished his degree, his bachelor's, right as the economy tanked, and it was a bachelor's of finance. He had nowhere to go because everything had gone. So fortunately for him, he was able to do another year of school and get a double bachelor's degree. Not everyone has it. In fact, very few have that opportunity. So it's very, very important that we help all of these students to find jobs, to find work that will make them feel like their studies weren't wasted, you know? A lot of things that we can do to help our young folks there in that area.
Definitely. Yeah. And COVID-19, it's changed the employment.
It really has. It's
Sorry, you're cutting out a little bit, so I don't know if I cut you off.
No, you're good.
We're just trying the best we can with COVID and internet and
You know
it. So I'll just go ahead and answer what I think your question was, and then if there's any clarification, then you can ask me. So
perfect.
COVID-19 changed a lot of employment prospects for recent graduates. I mean, people who graduate in a recession, they are more likely to take lower paying jobs. They're more likely to take jobs with less benefits. And so the effects of that last up to 7 years. And so as a representative, I would fight to make sure that this doesn't happen, that recent graduates to find jobs that have good benefits, that they're not just scrambling to take the first job that comes their way because they're scared about their student loans and paying that off. So I would propose legislation that diverts some of Utah's $1.72 billion unemployment trust fund to cover some of the interest of college students while they're looking for a job. So in a sense, to include them in that unemployment, because right now, in order to be included in unemployment, right, you have to have lost your job. And a lot of recent graduates, they don't fall under that umbrella. And so they're not protected when it comes to them graduating and them saying, look, I don't have job prospects right now, but I also don't know what to do because I'm not covered under unemployment. And so ensuring that they are protected in that sense so that they are not just scrambling, but then they can find a job that actually does have good benefits and good pay.
And it's good you bring that up because so many of the students at BYU, for example, work on campus jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And when they graduate, your job's gone, pretty much.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
You mentioned renters and supporting renters. Someone dear to me currently is renting. They were able to move from one location to another location owned by the same people, but at this point they need to move again. And the prospect of moving is terrifying to them because they have to come up with a security deposit, which does not, under the law currently, have to be returned to the renter, which is it's equivalent to a month of rent. And so they have to come up with first and last and security. That's 3 months of rent that somehow they have to cobble together on their meager earnings and still be able to provide for their young toddler son. What
Yeah, exactly.
would you recommend, or what would you want to try to do to help alleviate that?
Yeah, so there are quite a few things. So first, security deposits, just like you talked about, that I have become really passionate about because 84% of the people within our district, they are renters. And so I really believe that what is best for the students in this area is best for Utah. What is best for student renters is best for Utah. And so In regards to security deposits, Utah does not, they don't have to notify you if they decide to keep your security deposit. And it also does not limit how much a landlord can charge for security deposit. Limits on security deposits, and that can be a huge financial burden, not only for students, but also for families that are struggling to make ends meet for an obscene amount of money, right? And so occupancy limits is another thing in Provo where it's because in most towns outside of, or in most cities in Utah, outside of Provo or outside of university towns, the limit or the number of people that can live in something zoned as single family housing is 4 people. But in university towns, there's a special exception, and only 3 people can live in something zoned as single family housing. And that directly disadvantages students, and it makes it really difficult to find affordable housing for recent graduates, to find affordable housing if you are a family that needs to rent. So that's one. And then as well as standard of living. Standard of living, currently, there's no, landlords are not, it's not mandatory for landlords to have to, sorry, I'm like on a different computer and I am getting distracted.
No worries.
It is not on do not disturb, and I don't know how to turn it off of do not disturb.
Technology.
But standard of living, ensuring that people are able to live in apartments that are up to par with the current standard of living. And then filling contracts. That is another really big one, because right now Utah it is not mandatory for a landlord to actively seek a new tenant when someone moves out. And so in 50% of states, that is mandatory. In Utah, that's not mandatory. And so ensuring that we create a law where it mandates landlords to actively seek new tenants, so to kind of decrease that financial burden.
I always remember talking about having to find someone to buy out your contract, whether you were like King Henry or whatever else, right? You'd hear everybody talking about that in class, and it really does disadvantage students. It makes it all the harder for them, and where their job prospects, their dollars that they're earning today are not equivalent to the dollars that I was earning 20, even 10 years ago. And for them to pay for everything that they're having to pay for, they're in a tough boat. I look at all of that. I look at that area of Provo, and I know that right now one of the ballot initiatives is to possibly shift from county commissioners to a mayor council setup. So for you as a representative of that area of Provo and having to work with either the Utah County Commission or with the Utah County Council and Mayor, what would you do? What would you suggest to them? How would you approach either group to maybe work a change on a more local level?
Mm-hmm. On a more local level when it comes to housing?
Among other things, but yes, to start.
Okay, so I mean, in general, if that was your question in general, then just collaboration is really important. Having open dialogue in regards to what's important. Right now, students and young people are being brought to the conversation. And so ensuring that their needs in general are just being brought to the table and openly talked about and openly discussed, that's huge. It's not something that's happening right now. And so that mere fact, it would change the way just general, the way that we approach things and how we collaborate would be different because there is a representative that understands those needs and is willing to reach out and talk to that population.
In that role, would you develop ways to organize students and help them to know, hey, go to this Provo City Council meeting, or hey, go to this county council meeting, or this county commissioners meeting to lobby for this or that change? Is that something you would envision yourself doing with your office as a representative?
Yeah, Daniel, I am laughing because it's cutting out so terribly on my end. And so I'm just kind of thinking that I'm answering your question. So again, if you need to clarify.
You're doing good. You're doing good.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, when it comes to ensuring that students, a lot of the times, students and young people, they don't vote. I mean, largely, a lot of the times they don't see it as a means for change. They are more likely to engage in protests. They're more likely to engage in areas like that rather than voting. And so part of this campaign really is to kind of be a source of education as well, because right now, when we have representatives that don't represent us, it's easy to feel like, oh, this isn't for me. It's like this voting for local politicians, that's not for me. And so using this campaign as a form of education as well, of look, this is where you can go, this is where you can turn to, this if you have questions about this, talk to this person. Those are all things that I'm extremely passionate about, because I know that when we mobilize students and young people, when we have the input of the vast majority of the people living within this district, that things will change, and they will change for the better, because students and young people see.
I like that you brought up the idea of protesting. You know, it was most Utahns have heard, at least, how much it was talked about at the recent General Conference of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, where they talked about being civil and not protesting, or not rioting, rather. And I think the reason that these young folks and these other minorities that are frankly being downtrodden, I will say it plainly, they're being downtrodden by the establishment. They are feeling unempowered. They are feeling like they don't have a voice. And so I think you teaching them is very important, helping them to register to vote so that they can have a say, so that they don't feel impotent, but that they can actually contact someone and affect change to make those around them have an easier life, right? So I think that's a very important thing for
And
you.
I don't even, yeah, and I don't, thank you. I appreciate that. And I don't even want to phrase it in the way of I'm teaching them, right? Because this is when you have a representative that is willing to listen to the needs of the constituents within that area. It's not about like what can I give you? It's about, let me listen to these needs and these concerns. And part of the needs and the concerns unspoken are, we have not had a representative that represents us. And so when you listen to that and you hear that and you understand that, then part of that, it transforms how that campaign and how when you that looks of, yeah, this isn't just about creating policies. It is very much about that, but it's also a larger movement to include students and young people in the conversation where they have not been included before. And that education piece of, no, this is for you. This is for me. This, you belong at this table. Your voice belongs here. And we need that voice and we need that vote.
It's an interesting district that you cover as well, and the fact that they have not had so long someone who willingly represented their actual needs. I think that that's long overdue. We get someone who actually wants to represent them and wants to listen,
Thank
wants
you.
to care for them.
Thank you. I agree. I think that, I know that's important.
I'm just looking up the exact bounds of your district for those who might not know.
Perfect.
Let's see. I'm going to guess it's an 84601 among other zip codes. Of course not. Sure, why not? Well, obviously, it's not just students that live in that area, largely students, but not just students.
Yeah.
So for those who are not students, who maybe don't otherwise necessarily resonate with your message, what would you tell those folks that don't fit the student mold, but equally need to be represented, need to have their voice heard, and need to have consideration given to them by Salt Lake?
Yeah, definitely. So one of the big parts of my platform or the messaging is what's good for students is good. And so issues are important based not only as my experience as a student, not only talking to students and young people, but also being a social worker that is in the houses of families every single day. And right now, I'm in the houses of families over Google Hangouts, but I am in the houses of families every single day. And so I know the issues that impact the people within my community, not only students, but families. And the issues that I have prioritized, the issues of housing, the issues of employment, the issues of mental health, are all things that not only impact the students and young people within my district, but they deeply impact families as well. And what is good for those students and young people, it's good for the families as well.
One thing that is interesting about your district is it goes right up and over the hill and back down the other side. So you've got some wilderness area in your district. And immediately coming to mind, of course, is that poor student who was hiking and being chased by the mountain lion.
Oh, no.
There's that video that went viral, right? But what would you say if someone asked you to sign on or help or protect somehow these wild areas?
What would I say if someone asked me to protect the wild areas?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that protecting wildlife in wild areas is extremely important. And I also believe in honoring native lands. And I believe in respecting the lands that we have and ensuring that they are protected. Is that the answer you're looking for?
Yeah. Well, it's definitely an issue that will probably come up because you do have the wild areas, and I know students love to hike, and they love rock climbing up in Rock Canyon, among so many other things. So That's one thing that I appreciate where I live. There are a lot of hiking trails and open land that is zoned to remain open land. So
Mhm. Yeah, it's important to have those open spaces and to be able to, I mean, yeah, I love those areas, and so do a lot of people within this community. They find a lot of joy hiking and having a space to do outdoors things. So,
in your position as the representative for House 63, what would you do? Because obviously there is a very affluent area of 63. What would you do to help them understand the students better and rally to the students' cause? How would you reach out to them?
mhm. So my first week door knocking, we door knocked in Adam Robertson, who is the incumbent, his neighborhood. So we door knocked in a more affluent part of District 63, and we talked to people and we discussed their concerns. And and so again, reaching to people and being willing to have those conversations. We had a lot of people where they shared concerns and they were like, yeah, we need teachers to be more supported. We need really local politicians. They have the ability to transcend party lines in a way where you're focusing on the needs of the community and the needs of the individuals. And so ensuring that my messaging when elected is, yeah, even if you didn't vote for me, I'm still your representative and I'm still going to talk to you and I'm still going to reach out to you and I'm still going to care about what you have to say. And let's have conversations because I'm in office and I want to hear from you.
Two candidates on 2 days that have said pretty much that same thing. I may not have received your vote, but I'm still your representative. I still listen to you and I still want to serve you and take care of you just as much as anyone else. That's a very important thing that I think has been lost in a lot of recent politics, unfortunately. So at this point, we're kind of hitting toward the end of our night. What's an issue that maybe we haven't brought up that is really just something you really want to work on? Or have we hit all of your core issues that you want to work on?
I think a lot of people can agree with, whether that anyone in this district, a lot of students, a lot of young people, but also families can agree that education is something that needs to be worked on in our state and that we need greater support when it comes to teachers, especially need we need to ensure that people are getting the education that they need, but also that students are having the support that they need if things have to go online. Do they have the resources that they need? Do they have the support that they need? So really focusing on education as well and ensuring that those disparities that do exist within our community, those are often exacerbated by things such as COVID-19 and ensuring that we're addressing those.
It's important to bring up education because, for example, Amendment G, it's worded such that you think that it's saying, well, no, we're now going to take care of children with disabilities or persons with disabilities. We already do. And what Amendment G is going to do, and this is why I'm bringing this up to all of you viewers, Amendment G is going to take more money away from schools instead of having the money allocated for persons with disabilities and for schools. It's going to say, oh, well, we're going to draw it all from the same pot. And anyone who has watched Utah politics knows, unfortunately, the schools get the shaft. They just do. They get the short end of the budget stick. And that's a problem. And I'm glad that you are wanting to go to Salt Lake and advocate for our students, because if we teach the students, we are teaching the future, we are improving the future, making it better. And so to have people like you who want to fight for that very future is something very important to my heart as a father of 3. So
Yeah,
thank
definitely.
you.
Yeah, I think investing in students is the way that Utah can invest in its future. And we currently are almost dead last when it comes to educational spending per student, and that needs to change.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
Absolutely ridiculous that we're at that point. I am glad you're running, and I wish I lived in your area to vote for you. I hope that those who do live in your area and who've been able to listen in tonight can walk away knowing that you're in their corner. But in the last few minutes, I'll let you just go ahead and address them directly and say what's on your heart to your future constituents.
I have really enjoyed being able to campaign and talk to the people within this district, to talk to the people within this community and learn from them. And I've spent time again door knocking and talking to people on the phone, engaging with people on Zoom events, and I look forward to continuing these efforts and having a collaborative relationship with the people within this community and continuing to explore the needs and to have difficult conversations. So I look forward to continuing that, and I will see you on the ballot.
Very well said. Now, we do have a couple more candidates that are running here in Utah County. We're trying to pin them down, but thank you, Jenna, for joining us, and thank you for running in the first place. And I would say, if for some reason they don't vote you in this time, I hope you'll run again, because Utah County needs people who care for our county the way I know you do.
Thank you. I agree. We do need people that care for our county.
Well, everyone that's here watching, thank you for spending time with us tonight. We'll go ahead. We'll cut it a little short tonight, but if you have questions, where can they go to reach you or your team, Jenna?
Mm-hmm. So you can go to jenniferprovo.com. You can also find Provo on Instagram. And our Gmail is jenna463@gmail.com.
And
So
is that the number 4? Is it the number 4 or FOR?
Yes, so it's JENNAFOR Provo.
Okay.
So feel free to reach out to us on any of those platforms. One of my big things is that I want prompt responses and to really engage with constituents.
So there you go. If we haven't answered your questions, or if you find something that you want to bring up and understand where she stands so that she can win your vote, reach out, and otherwise get your ballots in. Last day to register to vote, if you have not registered to vote, is the 23rd. If you want a ballot mailed to you, you can register at the polls. If you have any questions about registration or about your ballot, reach out to our wonderful county clerk, Amelia Powers, and speak to her or to anyone in her staff. They're all very knowledgeable and all incredibly helpful. And they are there to make sure that your vote is cast, that your voice is heard. So thank you again, Jenna, for being with us tonight. And thank you all for being with us as well. And wish you happy voting.
Thank you so much. Nice. Thank you so much, Daniel. That was great, even with the technical difficulties. We had a lot.
It was better than with what my kids had done. The other night, they were stomping around like a herd of elephants upstairs with Ben last night.
I really Yeah, I don't know if it was my internet connection or what that was, but